Hey guys, in this week's episode, we are talking about Halloween Ends, but before that, we are talking Rings of Power and She-Hulk Attorney-at-Law wrap-ups. So, join us!
I always forget about the attorney-at-law part.
Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always to my virtual left is Mike. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well.
Yeah.
How are you?
So if, in honor of Halloween Ends, if you were going to end a horror franchise, what would it be?
What horror franchise would I end?
Yeah.
Well, if you would have asked me, like 10 years ago, it would have been the Saw franchise.
Sure.
But, actually, it's come back a couple times. They've tried to reboot it a couple times, so I still say the Saw franchise.
Also with me, Justin, virtual right. How are you doing today, and what horror franchise would you end?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I think I might end. Maybe this is not a right answer, but rather than a franchise, could I end exorcism movies for a while? Like possession
all
movies?
exorcism movies?
Yeah. We have
Is there
enough.
any specific exorcism movies that have bothered you of late?
Well, I mean, The Conjuring I really enjoyed, and then they made sequels to that, and it just seems like every now and then we go through like periods of like really bad possession, like Exorcism of Emily Rose, and
Hey, I still stand by The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I think that movie was marketed as a horror movie, which it is not.
Yeah, it's more of a trial movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But
no, I changed mine.
Oh, okay.
I'd say just specifically the Conjuring movies. I hate those movies. I liked the first one, I thought, but then as the series goes on, you realize that it's just glorifying these two criminals, like, and con artists that that like existed in real life and were horrible.
Yeah. Well, there's like spin-offs of those too, so we can kill
them all.
Direct sequels and spin-offs.
Yes.
Yeah, there's
also,
so
Chris,
many of those.
You never answered me. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, Mike.
Right,
introducing,
good.
I don't get asked that very often.
I know. I asked you, and your brain just rejected the question and moved on.
Oh, yeah. Because I was so interested in hearing how he was doing.
All right.
Yeah. What franchise would you end? Chris?
Yeah, Chris. What about you?
What would I end? I think I would end, like... I wouldn't end all the Exorcism movies, but like something like The Exorcist. I would love like a good complete ending, to one of those.
Isn't David Gordon Green, who just did this trilogy, tackling The Exorcist next?
Yep. Maybe that's why I was thinking of it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. All right. And if this is your first time listening, normally we like to start off every episode in a section called News on the March, where we talk about film and TV news, or really just the movies and TV and stuff that we have been watching since last time we recorded. Then we move into our feature review, and this week we will be discussing Halloween Ends.
Speaking of things ending or never ending, one of the things we like to do here on the Casual Cinecast is every other week we do a Casually Criterion episode, and how we do that is we choose a movie from the Criterion collection. Each of us choose one, and then we put it out to you guys on Twitter to vote on which one we want to watch. It'll never end. It's going to be, we'll die before we get through the whole Criterion collection, especially at the pace we're going. But make sure that you check out our last Criterion movie, The Gunfighter, and look forward to our next one, High and Low.
That's right. And also, it will end, because you just said we will die, unless someone carries on the show after we're gone.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or we somehow get to do this full-time and actually make money off of it, which we currently don't, and put out like 5 episodes a week.
Yeah, actually, so if there's anybody listening that wants to do that, call us.
Yeah,
bankroll
or email us. Yeah, we don't have a phone number really.
Bankroll this journey. We'll switch to all Criterions if you want. That's fine.
Yeah, just pay us.
We'll review anything if you pay us.
Well, maybe not anything.
We'll review your home videos.
Yeah, I don't care.
We'll review your TikToks. Anyways.
Ew.
as Chris mentioned, we put a poll on our Twitter account for those Criterion films. You can follow us there at Casual Cinecast. If you want to send us messages about the movies we're reviewing each week, you can send a message there or send us an email at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. Then, of course, if you haven't done so already, you like the show, you want to help other people find it, give us a rating, give us a 5-star review on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever.
Guys, I just got an email. They said they'd pay for us, but the only thing they want us to review is exorcism movies. I don't know.
I'm out.
Oh, no.
Wait, no, I'm in. I'm back in, actually. Never mind.
All right. We'll get in touch with their people.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Is it time to move into news on the march, or do we want to riff a bit more?
Let's move on. I'm sure we can
Okay.
find places to riff throughout the episode.
I've got a few more I'm holding on to for later.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
okay.
News on the march!
All right, here we are in News on the March. The first thing we wanted to talk about was Rings of Power. I think I'm the only one that's seen the show in its entirety, but I was really interested. Mike, you've seen some of it, right?
Yeah, I watched the first 3 episodes.
So I guess I was curious about what your feelings were, like maybe why you haven't finished it yet, those kinds of things.
Sure. So I guess I would say the reason I have not finished it is because I am not very familiar with the lore and the world of Lord of the Rings. I have not seen 2 out of the 3 movies since they were in theaters. And I've never seen the extended versions. And I've never read the books. So I found the world building and the lore in Rings of Power to be a bit overwhelming, I guess. And not even necessarily overwhelming, but not as interesting as I wanted it to be. So, anyways, I'm going to keep going, but I decided I wanted to go back and actually watch the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings movies. So I've done one of those now. And that was my first time watching the extended version of Fellowship of the Ring. And anyways, I've never been a huge fan of those movies, as you could probably tell, since I haven't watched 2/3 of the trilogy since theaters. But I want to enjoy Rings of Power as much as I can. So I kind of want to, the expression bone up on Lord of the Rings without actually reading them. Because I don't want to do that. But anyways, I will say that going back and watching Fellowship of the Ring, the extended version on HBO Max, was a really fun experience. I still don't love the movie, and I still think that the world building that exists in those movies is still a little bit obtuse to me. But man, what a technical feat that movie is, and I had a really good time just watching all the forced perspective shots and just like the deep love that went into making that first movie. So I can't wait to dive into the rest of the trilogy and then kind of go back and maybe restart Rings of Power from the beginning. Because the only character I even knew who I was like looking at, I was like, oh yeah, that's supposed to be younger Cate Blanchett.
Sure.
And I couldn't remember the names. I remember Sauron, But anyways, point is, I just wasn't getting enough out of it. And I think that a lot of this, like, oh, Galadriel talking to this guy, it would help if I remembered who this guy was. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this is the young Hugo Weaving. I didn't catch that on my first 3-episode watch through. And then now I'm like, oh, that was an important guy who I knew or who I'd seen before. So I think putting faces to names, that way I know which younger version of an elf I'm tracking. And just, I don't know, just kind of get a grip around the lore and the world, I guess, a bit more.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. Justin, how many did you watch?
I still have only watched 2, like the 2 that we had watched when we talked about it when the show first came out on News on the March. I haven't continued on, pretty much for similar reasons to you. I've watched the extended trilogy once and more recently than you had, but I think I pretty much feel the same way as you about them, but like also add in my typical talk of like not being that into fantasy type stuff,
Boo.
like medieval times. So like that's my barrier, I think. But that said, what I watched of it seemed equally as good as either of the Lord of the Rings movie, and maybe a little better than the Hobbit movies.
Okay, so Chris, now that you have seen the whole season,
I've
what
actually
are your thoughts?
revisited the movies more recently as well. Like I watched them this year, actually, all but the third one and the extended one. So and I'm not the biggest fan of those movies either, or I wasn't at the time. Kind of like what you were saying, Mike. They are great, like, mood movies, especially that first one. It's so happy, like, you visit the Hobbit world, and
it's filmed so well. Like, like whenever, like, the wraiths, that come in with their, like, black cloaks, and, like, it's just like, I think it's masterful storytelling for a story that I don't love, if that makes sense.
And the music of it, too. I think Howard Shore has some really great music that I love. But like you, and I think a lot of the lore and stuff, and maybe those issues with the movies, maybe stems from Tolkien to begin with, because I think he created this world, and while he wasn't necessarily the first one, he's certainly the father of modern fantasy.
Sure.
And so things that we are used to now, he kind of didn't really do, and stuff like that.
There would be no Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon without Tolkien,
In fact, like Game of Thrones is a direct answer to, like Lord of the Rings is like, sure, all the fun, you're going on the journey is fun, but what about the tax policies? Like that's what, like, what about the mundanity of life in that world?
Yeah, like what is, and he ruled happily ever after mean or whatever.
Yeah. Anyways, the show specifically is hit or miss for me. I think
I've heard that. I've heard that. But the thing is, what I can't really tell about this show and the discussion and discourse around it is it seems like one of those bad faith kind of elements, right? Where like a lot of people maybe don't like it for the wrong reasons. And it's
they didn't like it before it came out, type of thing.
Right, and they never were going to once they realized, oh, there's people of color, or oh, they made this change from the initial lore, or whatever. So it's hard to tell, really, where the common man's enthusiasm for the show begins and ends because of review bombing and, online toxicity.
Yeah. I think you're about to get the common man's perspective. Because I'm pretty common. But you're right. And I kind of hate talking about some of this stuff, like Star Wars, I think, is in this ballpark, and MCU stuff, because it's hard to talk about these things without these like external factors going on, But what I would say is I don't necessarily have a problem. I'm not a diehard Lord of the Rings fan, so if you change the lore, I don't even know. Sure. I'll listen to a podcast and maybe they'll tell me that the lore got changed, but like frankly, I don't care as long as it kind of
works for you as a viewer, right?
Yeah, as long as it's telling a good story. I don't really, and I guess it has to end in a place where you can still have Lord of the Rings, but as long as it's telling a good story, I'm happy with it. But I think that they made a weird decision to make, I don't think this is a spoiler, and you guys can tell me, but like Sauron is like a mystery. Like there's like 3 or 4 people that Sauron could be in the show, and you're like guessing the whole time. It's like, well, is it Sauron? Is it not? Who's this person? And I think they kept too many things a mystery, whereas if they had just let us know, and then we could have, like, part of the fun is dealing with the consequences of those actions as opposed to keeping them mysterious. And maybe that's too much Game of Thrones talk. Like when I went in, I kind of wanted a story of good versus evil, because that's what Lord of the Rings is. But it's also kind of like, it's kind of treading this line between wanting to be like Game of Thrones and wanting to be Lord of the Rings.
Well, I think that comes from the idea that Amazon greenlit this series and spent $1 billion because they wanted their own Game of Thrones. Sure. And I don't think that Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones are they're both fantasy shows, but that's about where the similarities end, you know?
Yeah.
The world building in George R. R. Martin's world is just a lot more simple and based in our real world than Lord of the Rings. So, like, when they start dropping, like, places, that's about as complicated as it gets. Like, oh, okay, Dragonstone is, like, this place that they're talking about. Whereas, like, Lord of the Rings, they're dropping lore bits left and right, and it just seems way more dense.
Yeah, I don't necessarily get elves, you know, like in the Lord of the Rings universe, just in general, you know, like they live for a long time. What are their motivations? You know, like, and then like even above that, there's like all these gods, like in the Lord of the Ring universe. And so it's kind of this, and a lot of it kind of falls down on Tolkien to begin with. So it's hard to adapt these things, I think, especially as you go back. The most adaptable thing has already been adapted, you know? But
and I think, honestly, with a series that dense, I think the fact that they were adapted into movies that they're still trying to honor and keep canon is kind of a problem, because if you want this to be Amazon's version of Game of Thrones, you need a TV show. And I don't know that the area of time and the history they're covering here would be the best option. Maybe it would be better if they just did a Lord of the Rings trilogy TV show.
Sure.
And instead of having like just 3 movies to tell such a dense world, right? Because I think that's maybe the barrier for entry.
The movies are basically TV shows, especially the extended editions are like 4 hours long.
That's why I went back and watched it. Like, the extended version of the first one helped a lot, because it feels like 4 episodes of a TV show crammed together.
Yeah. It's like binging a show, really.
Yeah. It's like binging like 4 episodes. And so that, I think, helps. But yeah, I think the nature of the first trilogy being movies makes it kind of jarring when tuning into the show, and then all of a sudden the pacing is slower and the explanations of things seem way more like they're just coming at you with a lot of stuff, basically.
Yeah. There's also the rights issues, which they can only do 8 episodes of a TV show. It's like the rights issues alone are just like a giant headache, I imagine, in trying to make this show, you know, because they have rights to some things, but like they don't have rights to hobbits for some reason. So they call them Harfoots, and it's just kind of this weird thing. What I will say, you know, I've kind of been a little negative, but like the visuals of the show are great. You know, like the show looks really great.
Oh, for sure. I keep seeing stills of like big set pieces in this show. And I don't really know what the context around them is, but like every time I'm like, man, this show looks so good.
Yeah, it looks really great. And I think that there are, I would say, the majority of the cast is, you know, exceptional, especially because I think the weakness of the show is perhaps the writing. It feels a little uneven, but the acting of it is really great. And there are like certain, like there's a dwarf and an elf relationship that's really fun, and the Harfoots / hobbits is really fun. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to speak to it, and I'm hoping that in the next season it'll get a lot better. But I will say I enjoyed most of it. I finished it, you know, like but it was touch and go there for a while.
Yeah, I think once House of the Dragon is over, like next week, and I need an itch to scratch, I'll probably have an excuse to dive back into it a little bit more.
Cool. You have to let me know what you think.
Yeah. What about you, Justin? Are you ever going to pick it back up?
Maybe. I'm not totally against it. You know, I think what you just said makes sense for me too. So I was also trying to watch House of the Dragon, which I've since given up on, but I was watching that and Rings of Power at first, and I think it was just a bit too much for me. Too samey, even though they are different shows, but you know what I mean? Too similar genre-wise. So now that I've given up on House of the Dragon, I think, I don't know, there's a bit of an appeal. Just also like, you know, She-Hulk, which we're about to talk about, ended, and some other things have ended. I feel there's a bit of a lull. So maybe, because I agree that the show looks great, and I enjoyed that. And, you know, I want to try. I want to keep trying on like the fantasy stuff, you know? I feel like one of these days I'm going to encounter something that actually like gets its hooks into me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for someone who struggles with fantasy, I feel like maybe Rings of Power will be a harder barrier of entry than House of the Dragon was, but I don't know. I haven't finished the season, obviously. So
save it up, because one of my favorite book series, the Way of Kings, is going to be made into something. The author has teased that it's going to become something. Brandon Sanderson. So save it up.
Hopefully not a Netflix production.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Like a TV show?
Who knows what'll happen?
What if it's a Broadway musical?
Oh, we can all make a trip to New York and watch it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure there will be more fantasy in the future. So
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else we want to say about Rings of Power before we move on?
I don't think so. I don't have anything. I didn't have much to say in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris?
No, I let us know what you think, because I think it's so split on people. That's what's kind of really interesting, and it's hard to tell because there are so many like bad faith actors out there, and then there's people reacting to the bad faith actors. It's hard to get an honest opinion, is what I feel like.
Actually, I will say that people hating on it for stupid reasons makes me want to like the show and makes me want to go watch it and like it. You know?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's all we have to say about Rings of Power. So moving on now to our next topic, which we have all seen and can all contribute more to. She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Yeah, so I will go ahead and get us started on this because, I don't know, I'm talking now and I just want to do that.
Yeah, fair
Is that
enough.
cool with you guys?
Yeah, go.
Okay. I had fun with this show from week to week. I enjoy the fact that this show has a woman's point of view of the MCU so far. And so you get some fun jabs and jokes in there. I think it's overall a pretty fun show. That said, this show has some mighty rough edges that it asks you to look over, in my opinion. For example, and I know this is a common critique, so I won't spend much time on it, but the way She-Hulk, the character model, looks and moves around doesn't always work, especially in the middle episodes of the season, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And also, it's not always consistent. Some episodes it looks fine, and others just look super ropey, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That has been talked about to death, so whatever. It is what it is. I don't want to focus on it too much, but it is a legitimate criticism that we would be remiss not to mention, I think. My other complaint, before getting into the good stuff, the stuff that I liked, would be that some of the jokes don't always land. There were plenty of jokes and bits that made me laugh throughout the show, but ultimately there were probably just as many that didn't work for me at all. Sometimes it gets to be a little too much when the show isn't as clever as it thinks it is or wants to be. That said, I am in my 30s. And I'm sure little kids might think it's like super clever. You know, it might literally be the most clever show that like a 10-year-old has ever watched. I don't know.
Right.
But for me, yeah, the humor, like a lot of the humor just didn't work. All that out of the way, like I said, I had fun with this show. I am bummed that it's over. And I would like more of this, please. One of the more enjoyable and better examples of how to make episodic MCU stories, in my opinion, where it doesn't just feel like a movie stretched out.
Yeah.
It feels like it was always meant to be a TV show and could not be trimmed down into like one movie.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. Justin, what say you, sir?
Yeah, I like what you said, that you were sad that it's over, because I haven't really processed that emotionally yet, which sounds a lot deeper than I probably mean it to. But I was sad when I realized it was the last episode and there was not going to be any more for a while, because I was enjoying it. And I don't think I realized quite how much I was enjoying it until it was over.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's a pretty big turnaround, because I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast after one episode or after two episodes.
I think
just one. Two?
Well, I think two, because I remember talking about how we didn't like two as much, and we were like, this feels more like what the show's supposed to be versus the first episode.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, with the second episode, I remember distinctly thinking, this show might be bad, actually. I don't think I like this. So it's a pretty big turnaround. And, a lot of what you said is true, Mike. There are problems. It's not 100% successful all the time. Bad VFX in places. I'd say there's more bad looking She-Hulk than good. And maybe it's just something that I adapted to over time or stopped caring about, because ultimately that's not even what the show is about more than anything else. Like bad visual effects in the Avengers or something is a lot worse than in a show
like
about
a 20-minute
She-Hulk
serialized weekly comedy.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like comedy first, and most of the time she's doing attorney stuff and not fighting a lot. And then, there are even places where they have fun riding around, having big battles and big climactic fight scenes, Yeah,
and that's a big portion of what this show does, for sure.
Yeah.
It's commenting directly on that stuff.
Yeah, so I ended up being pretty charmed by the show. I ended up, really loving the main character. What is the actress's name, Mike? You say it all the time.
Tatiana Maslany.
Tatiana.
Yeah. She's great. I really...
Yeah, she's so good.
Yeah, felt I made that connection with her where I was just really rooting for her and feeling bad for her all the time. Like, when things are going wrong, when she's having to do, sign up as a dating app and tries to do it as herself, and then that's not working out. So then she tries to do it as She-Hulk and make a She-Hulk dating profile, and that doesn't really work out that great either, And I think really I felt for her more than I thought I would, and I think at the end of the day, this is one of my favorite Marvel shows because, as you said, it's the first one in a while that I can think of, and maybe even like across many other shows. It's a thing we've talked about with other shows, that it doesn't feel like they've stretched a movie length story out into a 6-episode series. It feels episodic. It feels serialized, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that come in and out that don't come back or don't come back in like a super important way where it feels like a B plot. It just feels like, oh yeah, that did happen like several episodes ago and wasn't really that important until now,
Right.
And it just feels really successful on all of those fronts, despite its shortcomings. So I actually came away a really big fan. I'll leave it there because I'm sure we'll get into more stuff, but I'll toss it over to Chris. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I think actually the CG to a certain extent is kind of explained away in the finale. I don't know if we'll do spoilers on here.
It's commented
but
on.
Bad CG is yeah, at least it's commented on. So like, it kind of gives a reason for bad CG.
Well, it acknowledges the reason we all know already of why it looks this way.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of like the lore. CG just in general, or like special effects, is kind of like the lore in Lord of the Rings. Or like, I don't care as long as you're telling me a good story. Like, it can look really crappy, but if I'm emotionally involved in the characters, I don't necessarily care. And sure, at the beginning, I was like, this looks pretty bad. But as I got to know the characters, it didn't necessarily matter as much.
Like I said, I am fairly certain that the beginning and the end of the show is where most of the money went, and the beginning episodes just got a little less money.
Yeah, that may be.
Yeah.
I also think it's certainly the most like a sitcom. Like I've been rewatching Parks and Recreation lately, and a lot of the complaints that you have about She-Hulk, like the jokes missing. I think that happens with Parks and Recreation too. It's just like you got to throw enough jokes. You just got to
as long as
tell a joke
stick,
and you
good.
move on. You go to the next one.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you move on, and as long as I'm not repulsed by the joke, as long as I'm not rolling my eyes, like it's fine. I can move on past it. Maybe it's funny to somebody else. Maybe Justin likes that joke where I don't, or vice versa. So I think that's kind of the magic of a sitcom, or like that's how sitcoms work, is, you know, throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and it'll stick for some people and won't for others. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I you know, Tatiana Maslany is really great. If you guys want to, you should go watch Orphan Black, because she plays like 100 different characters in there, and each one is very individual. So you get to watch her really cook in that show. But I also think some of the side characters are really kind of what sold me on the show. I think it was really the magician episode where we got the magician, and then what's his name?
Wong.
Yeah, Wong.
Madison.
And Madison with a Y and an I or something.
But it's not where you expect him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, I like this, you know, and more of these side characters. And I think we got a lot more of those that kind of stand out. Like the ribbit, the frog.
Rip it and
villain.
ribbit or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. So we got a lot of stuff like that. We got some cameos that I thought were really fantastic, and commented on the previous show that was on Netflix, you know, like, so I thought it was really a lot of fun. I liked how they anticipated all the negative things people would say about this show, and addressed them, you know, like, and I thought, oh, well, that was really cool. And I don't know. I was really charmed by the whole thing.
I agree. And I think real quick, now that we've all given our general thoughts, we should get into spoilers. And if you don't want to hear any She-Hulk spoilers, you could skip ahead to the Halloween Ends review. It'll be timestamped. But is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's great, Chris, on just bleeping off what you said just then. I think it's great that the main true villain of this show is basically just boils down to like misogynistic incels on the internet. Like, that is the villain, you know, and that is true for the show's review bombing as well. You know, you go to IMDb or whatever, and you look at like the obviously idiotic reviews that this show is getting from some, you know, users. And I think it's
the bad faith arguers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just so funny that like that's kind of what this whole show's about, is basically just the types of people that are trashing on it. It tackles head on as its main villain and part of the problem. And I wish a lot of these franchises that have these toxic fandoms could have the balls and the bravery to put out something that critiques that kind of thing. I mean, She-Hulk lends itself to that because she's always been kind of fourth wall breaking, from what I understand. So you can't do that with every IP. I understand that. But it's refreshing to see them basically be like, oh yeah, I know what you're saying about the show, and we're making fun of it on the show before you get a chance to do it.
Yeah, I feel like they anticipated, you know, people were saying, you know, they'd already made the whole show, and people were already making complaints, and then we got the finale, and it was like, oh, these are all things I saw on the internet already. You know, like, they just anticipated all these things, you know, like, you know, about her twerking or whatever, you know, like, and I found that really fascinating. And also a thing I think I hadn't thought about, but the way, so like the main villain, you know, like Hulk King, he was gonna get, you know, the serum at the beginning, you know, at some point, and they're like, well, why would you give him the serum? Like, why are you rewarding him? you know, like, for being a dick, you know, like, so I which I think is a trope that I hadn't noticed before, you know, so I've liked that, them calling that trope out too, you know.
Sure, yeah. Justin, what'd you think of the finale?
Man, the finale surprised me, you know?
Yeah.
It's a show that somehow, it's got more episodes than the average Marvel
Yeah, it's
show.
equal with
How many was it?
WandaVision
12?
with 9.
9?
Andor has 12, yeah. She-Hulk had 9.
Oh, okay. She got 9, okay. So, longer than normal, and yet, by the final episode, I was totally thrown for a loop from the way the episode opens with the sort of, as if She-Hulk was a 70s show, like the opening credits with like bad voiceover and everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, from there, it just goes even more off the rails. You know, it's very specifically what I was talking about whenever I was saying that, they ride around a big climactic action scene, which we're about to get to. And then, of course, she jumps through like the Disney app and finds Kevin Feige or whatever his name is
Kevin,
supposed to be, who's just a robot named Kevin.
Yeah, with his little hat on, like Kevin Feige always wears.
Yeah.
Like how the robot had a little built-in hat.
And, basically convinces him to rewrite the whole show. We lose our climactic action ending and just skip to the end.
And also,
of everything.
and also provide Matt Murdock to be there for no reason because a woman has needs. And then the robot's like, an area we've traditionally not explored or whatever, like. So it's like, I like how it's like just kind of crapping on the MCU's formula that we all kind of get frustrated with by being like, no, we don't need a stupid third act fight. We just need characters to accept responsibility. And, this is what the story's about, not the action set pieces and all that stuff. So, I think the finale was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And I think as somebody that like had been, we talked about this, I don't know, a few weeks back, but like I've been feeling like Marvel fatigue, this was refreshing, and it feels like also by saying all those things about like, we got to shoehorn in, Hulk's son in here and stuff like that. It was making fun of those things, and it felt like they're like, yeah, we know what we're doing, and the tropes that we're putting out there, we'll do better next time, or does that make sense? It kind of felt like I was being heard a little bit.
Do you think that it's any sort of admission of things they've got wrong and they'll take steps to do things better or more interesting going forward, or do you think it's like, yeah, we know who we are, and that's we can joke about it too while continuing to be that?
I think it depends on how much of that comes from the showrunner, and Kevin Feige kind of just allowing these things to happen, or how much of it, Kevin Feige's like, you know what, you're right, but like at least the showrunner gets it, like if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't have anything else on She-Hulk. So if no one else has anything, I think we could move into Halloween Ends. What do y'all think?
Let's end this.
It's been 4 years since Michael Myers vanished without a trace.
Hello?
Saw him watching me.
You pretend like you moved on, but you're actually just obsessed with death.
What are you gonna do when Michael comes back for you? Because he is coming.
But this time, something feels different. He's more dangerous. He killed my daughter. But tonight, I will kill him. Come and get me. Maybe the only way he can die is if I die too. It all ends now.
All right, so as always with our newer movies, we'll be doing a spoiler-free section up front. We'll be giving our general thoughts and feelings about Halloween Ends. And before we get into spoilers, we'll give you a warning. We'll play a bumper so that you have plenty of time to pause the podcast, go watch Halloween Ends on Peacock, and then come back and finish listening.
All right, so Halloween Ends was directed by David Gordon Green. It stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Andy Matichak, and Rowan Campbell. The IMDb synopsis says, the saga of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode comes to a spine-chilling climax in the final installment of this trilogy.
I really hate that synopsis.
Yeah.
When I put in the show notes, I was like, that's lame.
Yeah, it seems like a placeholder synopsis.
Yeah. Like before you know any details about the movie or the plot.
Right. Yeah, it's like Halloween ends, going into production next, you know? Like,
yeah. It's literally, it doesn't tell you anything that you couldn't get from the title.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Except it tries to tell you that it's spine chilling. And maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We'll find out.
Maybe, sir. So I watched this movie on Thursday night, the night it dropped on Peacock and on the internet and in theaters. So I was ready to see this movie pretty much right away. And when it was over, I was kind of confused as to my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't spoken to you guys about it since you've watched it. I don't know what you guys think of this movie. I can imagine, but I don't know.
Right.
So who wants to get started?
I feel like I got us started on She-Hulk, so maybe Chris.
Okay. Chris.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on Halloween Ends?
So unlike you, I did not watch this Thursday night. I was excited for the movie. I really liked the first one of this series, the David Gordon Green Halloween movies. I wasn't super high on the second one, but I remember when we talked about it, I was like, it depends on where the third one goes, as to like that. A lot of that will influence where I am with the second one, right?
Right. Same. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually watched this. We are recording this on a Wednesday. I watched this the Tuesday after it was released. So I had a whole weekend of the internet telling me how bad it was. So part of my reaction probably has to do with that. I should have watched it Thursday night like you did, Mike. I enjoyed this movie. There are things, and I guess we'll get into spoilers here, but like there are things about it that I really enjoyed. I enjoy the town of Haddonfield in the trilogy, I think is what I'm going to say. It is the first one. There's a clip on Twitter that had all the supercut of Jamie Lee Curtis going around to all the different talk shows and saying generational trauma, yeah. And I it was kind of ridiculous because she said it a lot. And also I think she pronounced trauma wrong. But anyways, that's not the point. I pronounce a lot of things wrong. But I think what this trilogy ultimately ends up being, and we can talk about whether it's successful. So what they're trying to be is about how evil can spread and upset a town, and how trauma can upset a town in such a way and make people treat each other shittily. I think is what is kind of the main, and I like that thesis in this third movie. Now there are some things that perhaps don't work very well in this movie, but I ultimately like that idea. There is some cool sequences in this. I watched this last night and then immediately watched Fallen Angels by Wong Kar-wai afterwards because
a palate cleanser.
Yeah. Well, because there's this on the cover of Fallen Angels, you have these two people riding a motorcycle, and so when I saw the two main characters in this movie riding a motorcycle, and the feeling I got from them, like this feeling of rage and like trying to be free of this town, and like let's just fucking burn it all down. I was like, well, I'm gonna watch this movie, because it kind of had that feeling. Anyways, so I think I might be the lone, voice of I enjoyed this movie, and I think ultimately I enjoyed the trilogy. But yeah, so Mike, what did you think?
Man, I am so taken aback by that. I was not expecting that. Okay, so yeah, I have been thinking about this movie since it opened Thursday evening, basically. I was very much looking forward to this film. I'm a big fan of the original Halloween, and pretty much most of John Carpenter's 70s and 80s output. I really enjoyed the start of this new trilogy, like Halloween 2018.
Yeah.
And like you said, I was mixed on Halloween Kills. I wanted to see if this new one could stick the landing and make the trilogy feel worth it, in my opinion. And I'm not sure I got that exactly with this movie. I initially left this movie feeling a bit confused and disappointed, but at the same time, I really appreciate the big swing that this third entry of David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy takes, being such a vast departure from its predecessors. Like you said, I think that's what this trilogy is about. We get the story here about this town that's damaged and has this sinister underlying current because of what Michael Myers, a.k.a. The Shape, has wrought over the decades. You know, the fear and the ghost stories. You know, once he got out after 40 years of being imprisoned and has basically been at large for 4 years when this movie starts, the town is basically going nuts with that looming over them, you know? Where is he? Is he coming back? Does living under that kind of fear, what does it do to the people who live there? And what do they become living under that kind of fear? I think this movie asks a lot of really interesting questions. And in my opinion, it does make Halloween Kills feel a little bit more worthwhile.
Yeah, agreed.
But man, are there some weird decisions made in this movie.
Also agreed.
that are just so like, I remember like 40 minutes into this movie, I was like, what am I watching? And why am I watching this? But ultimately, like, even though the movie ended and I felt a little disappointed and taken aback by like what I just saw not being what I expected. But it is the answer to the question of like, why is Halloween Kills so brutal? Why are we focusing so much on all these other characters? What are we doing with this? Like, where's the direction of this trilogy going? And in retrospect, I think the arc makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't stop thinking about this movie. So that's probably a good sign. I already like it more like days later than I did initially. But I don't know that I can completely defend a lot of the wackiness in this movie that I'm sure we'll get into in spoilers. But I guess we'll keep it there. I admire it more than I love it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So Justin, what do you think about Halloween Ends and all the previous Halloween stuff?
Yeah. Well, as far as the previous stuff goes, love the original. Really enjoyed the 2018 reboot. Did not enjoy Kills very much. And that brings me to this one. And I think I had heard a little bit about, you know, this movie's not very good, it's bad. And I can't really say how much that colored my perspective because I didn't really read anything about it. I didn't see too much of it. It sounds to me like
Sure,
Chris saw more of that than I did. So I didn't really feel inundated by it. I just seen a couple different takes. Some of which were this movie rules too, right?
Yeah, I have seen a lot of people defend this movie more than I expected.
Yeah. And I'm somewhere in the middle. I think I lean more towards liking this movie, at least from a sense that I enjoyed it and was entertained. Some of that entertainment came from what you said, Mike, of like, what is this movie? What are they doing?
Yeah.
What's happening here? And how is this happening?
Or like, is this real? What I'm watching? Is this like a dream? Or like, am I watching something that's really happening?
Right. And you know, not to get into the details much, I won't say anything spoilery. I don't think, and if it is, it'll be cut out. But the thing that I liked a lot about Halloween 2018 is that it kind of forgot a lot of these Halloween sequels that we've gotten in between the original film and that one. Like, I mean, I think it ignored all of them, but
all of them except for the first one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. So it it seemed a lot more realistic, and a lot less like convoluted at times,
Talk about
like
the first one, the first 2018 one?
Yeah, Halloween 2018 compared to things like, oh, it's her brother and
right.
I don't know.
He's after his other sister. Yeah.
Yeah. Things like that. It felt a lot more rooted in reality and a lot more natural, I think. So this film does something quite different. And
yes.
That departure, I think shook me for a while. But once I kind of adapted to it, I was just, I really enjoyed a lot of what they did. I thought a lot of the kills were good. Just the structure of the movie kind of fascinated me as to where we were going and where we would end up. Like, I truly didn't know where the film was going to go and what kind of climax we were going to get until we got it.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's something I think I can't always say for the horror genre,
For sure.
So, yeah. To that end, and it was surprising and interesting. And, I think the thing that if I were to complain about anything, maybe the thing that I disliked the most is, all of these themes that you guys are talking about of generational trauma and the town of Haddonfield and everything that it's going through, and how does that affect the people growing up in it and affect people's view of other people in town, is all really great. But I felt like I noticed a few too many times where that was mentioned and the question was asked quite literally in dialogue in a couple places.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did not like that.
It's heavy-handed.
It kind of, like those themes were already there, and I felt a step ahead of it. And it just kind of bugged me when those lines were delivered, because it took me out of the movie. Kind of felt written and
right. You're
like the writers
that is
were,
the theme of this movie.
Hey, this is what we're talking about, by the way, just in case you weren't here. And for a film that I think needs to be super confident because of what it's doing and the big swings that it's taking, like you said, Mike, I guess that those moments shake my confidence in the filmmakers a bit.
See, I view that more. Yeah. I mean, I understand that, but I view that more as, I don't want to, this sounds so, rude. I don't mean it the way it's about to come out, but I don't know that the fans of Halloween movies are necessarily looking for a point, right? So it feels like, those lines are kind of basically like, yes, this is the thesis of the movie, or this is like what we're saying, this is the theme. I feel like maybe there's one too many of those in there, but also I think it might be needed for some audience members who think they're just going in for Halloween Kills Part 2.
Well, it's kind of like the 3-part reveal. Like the first one's real subtle, and then the second one's, you see it a little bit more, and then the third one's just like in your face. Here it is for everybody that didn't notice.
It feels like he made Halloween Kills so he could make like 5 Halloween movies in one with its potency. It's just so nuts and violent and crazy. I think David Gordon Green described it as a Michael Myers opera. It's like the most Michael Myers killing people movie you could ask for.
Right.
This one's less that.
And I think he knew, especially based on the font being very similar to the original Halloween 3 at the beginning, which is a movie notoriously hated by the Halloween fan base for not having Michael Myers in it at all.
Yeah,
choosing that font, I think he knew exactly, he's like, okay, I'm making Halloween Kills to have the most potent, fan service-y kind of Halloween movie that exists, because in the third one, I'm not going to be delivering that.
Right.
I'm going to be doing something completely different. So it feels intentional to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, that point, for sure. I think in regards to, is the movie too handholdy? I mean, we can only view the movie for the most part through our own specific lens. But I think it's a fair point that considering a broader point, you kind of have to have a lowest common denominator of stuff if you really want to get your message out there, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think you can say, as opposed to just Halloween fans, you can say these movies are made to have the widest appeal possible. You know, like as much as horror movies hit all 4 quadrants, you know, it's the same as like a Marvel movie, you know, as opposed to saying specifically Halloween fans. You know, like I think these movies oftentimes can be dumbed down for the 4 quadrant appeal of it.
Yeah, it is a product, and they need to make money off of it,
yes.
after all.
And I think that might be some of the problems. I think you can see a movie that David Gordon Green wants to make, but he also has to do these other things. So yeah.
Sure. Well, let me ask you guys this. I think, Chris, you kind of commented on this, but what about you, Justin? This movie, God, I can't believe you guys are as positive on this movie as you are. Not because I can't believe it, because the movie is absolutely horrible. I'm kind of right there with you guys. I just expected a different reaction from you guys, I guess. Do you guys think, in retrospect, knowing the outline of this trilogy and what David Gordon Green was trying to do and what he's trying to say, and the way the third one is such a departure from the slasher gore fest that was the second one, do you feel like the second one's still bad? As bad as it felt at the time? Or do you think there's a little bit of redeeming qualities to it now? Or are you looking at it the same way? How do you feel about the trilogy as a whole?
I think I'm more interested in rewatching Kills than I ever would have been without this movie.
Thought you'd be?
Yeah. Because where this goes does make it feel like, oh, if I went back and watched that one, I might pick up the breadcrumbs, the little hints and foreshadowing or whatever at where they're ultimately going. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if it makes it better. That would have to be done upon a rewatch, right? Or evaluated upon a rewatch. But
sure.
It makes me more intrigued to go watch the trilogy as a whole and consider the trilogy more worthwhile.
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of there with you. I think the second 2 definitely feel more of a piece than the first one. And I kind of wonder how much COVID has to do with all that. I don't know how much was filmed of the second one, you know, before COVID hit and stuff like that, or if any at all. So there's certainly, like, what would we have gotten without COVID? That's an interesting what if. But I do think that the second 2 are more of a piece than the first one. But it's kind of like Star Wars in a way. You know, the first one is like reassuring us, like, look, guys, we can do slasher, you know, like, and then in the next 2,
we know what you want to see.
Yeah, the prequel trilogy was that way. Yeah,
we can depart a little bit here. So yeah, I like it. If we don't have anything else, I'm excited to get into spoilers.
Sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like we have 3 recommends if you've been following these movies at all. Don't
look, if you got through Halloween Kills, you might as well watch this one. It's not worse than that one, and I think it might make Halloween Kills better. So,
or at least feel better in your memory.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a thing I should save to get to spoilers. If it is, we can pause. But if I were to make another complaint, or at least ask a question, if this is a valid complaint, is that I think maybe the movie was a little too short, because there are some segments of this movie that feel absolutely rushed and blown through.
Yeah, and that's actually my first major complaint when we get into spoilers.
Okay. Well, then we'll pause it there, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So spoilers for Halloween Ends starting now.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
Any orange cigarettes you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
Okay, so do you want me to go ahead and start with my complaint about that, or do you want to state what you were talking about specifically?
No, it's your first complaint. Go on.
Okay. The love story between Laurie Strode's granddaughter and Corey, I believe is his name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It feels so lifeless and rushed and fast.
Yes.
That I had a hard time getting into the second half of the movie. because I felt like the first half was just this weird, rushed mess, in a sense. Like, I liked the intro, the very beginning intro, where Corey babysits and his little origin story.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah,
I thought that was great because, you know, that shows you what the town is really like. Like, little kids are talking about Michael Myers is coming to get you, and, like, he's living rent-free in this town's head. And that's cool. You know, I like that. That's very important to what the overall trilogy is saying. But man, oh man, it felt like some things were just strange. Like Laurie Strode, like saving this guy from a band of bullies of high school band students. This grown man being bullied by like
I actually
band
think
students?
it may be a comment on, you know, like usually it's football players, right? And this time it's the band beating up on some kid. I think
Go on.
I just think that might be a joke in itself.
Sure, I think so too. But it's bizarre because she saves him, and then for no reason, through no charm whatsoever, he's like, oh, this guy gets bullied by like teenagers and stuff, and I feel bad for him. Let's introduce him to my granddaughter. And then very quickly after that, I'll change my mind and decide I don't think that's a good idea. And like all of that felt really weird and kind of rushed and sloppy to me.
Sure, and I think the granddaughter also like has this attraction to him real quick. And, you know...
Yeah, things get serious real fast.
But also, I think she gives him a look. I think before she even hears or has like any conversation with him or has spoken a word to him.
Yeah,
she's
she knocked
already
over the
given
tray.
him the
That
eyes.
means love.
What's that? Again, say that again, Chris?
Oh, I was like, she knocked over the tray, so that obviously she's in love in movie language. You know, like if you...
Get clumsy and dumb.
Yeah. How much of this, like... I don't know. Trauma. I guess I'm just trying to defend it, but like, I did enjoy that relationship. But none of what you guys are saying is wrong. But like,
I enjoy the idea of it.
Yeah. Could trauma, you know, like having dealt with trauma, do you tend to? Although I don't necessarily want to look for any like real life analogies in this, but like. If you've been traumatized, do you tend to fall in love a lot quicker and jump into things a lot quicker? I don't know about that. That's probably a little too far, too much of a reach.
I don't know that the movie has that question on its mind, but I will say that I feel like the trauma of that one night 4 years ago on Laurie's granddaughter could be played up a bit more, because even though it took place over 2 movies in 4 years, for the characters it was one night. So it was like one insane night where Michael Myers broke free and killed like 40 people. Like, that would be quite the story for any town, you know? And she lost both of her parents that same night, even though it was 2 movies apart.
Sure.
Right.
So I feel like we could I think the secret would be giving Laurie's granddaughter a little bit more screen time than Laurie gets. I feel like they were like, we got Jamie Lee Curtis for one last movie. We'll make it about Laurie Strode. And that part's good, but I feel like the granddaughter, what's her name? I forget.
Allison?
Yeah. Allison? Yeah, I feel like she needed a little bit more screen time to make this arc really work.
I do think we get, maybe not the beginning, but we do get that she's kind of ostracized, much like the kid, you know,
Sure.
Corey. And that's supposed to be the connection there too. You know, like they're kind of both these people that this big event happened, and they're kind of tied together. And the town won't let either one of them forget what happened, you know?
Yeah, that's good on paper, but let's see a little bit more of that in the script,
I think
in the movie.
I agree that more time would make it feel a little easier because, you know, while I get it, I think I was doing a lot of work watching the movie to understand the relationship.
To get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's there. And I think everything that was just said by you guys is where I landed. But it takes a lot of work because they're not really taking us through the steps, especially to end up at a point where, you know, she's willing to throw everything away after knowing this guy for like 2 days. And Yeah, I don't know. That's not like the first time that story's ever been told necessarily. I don't know if I just didn't feel the chemistry between the two of them.
I feel like the movie doesn't do a very good job of representing the passing of time.
Maybe that's it. Because I felt like it was 2 to 3 days, but maybe it's not.
Right. And I feel like it would be stronger if like it was, I don't know, like January when they met and we're heading towards Halloween over the course of the plot, you know? And like we know Halloween is coming.
Yeah. Have we all seen...
that way...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. I mean, you knew where I was going with that, but go on.
Have we all seen Badlands, the Terrence Malick movie?
Yes.
I have not, but yeah. I know the...
Bonnie and Clyde. Have you seen that?
Yeah, Bonnie and Clyde. That's, you know,
well,
they want to burn it down.
Yeah. And both of those movies, the characters meet and very quickly, you know, go off on a doomed path, right? And a path of impending doom. And I guess like I'm interested in why that can work and why it can't. And I feel like it doesn't work in this movie without all of the, you know, all of the context of Allison beforehand. And like I said, doing a lot of work. I don't know if there's any theories or even I don't know if it's worth discussing.
I mean, I agree with you. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think one of the reasons I like this movie is because of that relationship. Everything you guys are saying is right, but it's kind of like the reason I watched Fallen Angels is because I wanted that motorcycle. I love that motorcycle, them riding on the motorcycle, you know, and sometimes I do this where I attach to like one little thing in the movie, but it kind of speaks to me. But like both of them riding on that motorcycle, being angry and kind of like yelling and just wanting to burn it down, kind of like Badlands or Bonnie and Clyde, that I liked that. And that was kind of all I needed. You know, was that scene of them riding on the motorcycle, and I understood their relationship.
Right. I think that's fair.
There's a point where I'm with them, but getting there at times it seemed, I don't know, it seemed like the
iffy,
person that Allison was talking to Laurie before she meets him and early on to where she is later, they don't seem the same. And I'm not sure when or why that transition happened, despite falling in love.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that too. And there's also the weird, like, that we haven't talked about, but like him meeting Michael Myers and, you know, like looking into his eyes and then Michael Myers letting him go. And then all of a sudden he's evil, you know, like
that I understand more.
Sure. I
that
guess
was
so.
more telegraphed pretty clearly in the film language of like when they meet. Like, let's talk about that real quick. I guess we've spent enough time on this love story.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael Myers is living in a drain, like a hole in the wall inside of a drain pipe. Right? Yeah. And that's where he's been living. It seems like he'll take the occasional homeless man or whatever in there, I assume to eat.
Sure.
Mm.
Well, I mean, like in the original Halloween, like he ate dogs and stuff in abandoned houses, you know, so dude's a cannibal.
Yeah.
Or a meat eater at the very least. And so I think he's eating the people. I think that's what's implied. Although we never see a big pile of bones or anything.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Corey gets thrown over the bridge by the bully band, and Michael drags him into the drain pipe. At which point, I don't know why Michael doesn't kill him immediately, but apparently, like, here's the biggest leap I think that they're making for Halloween fans, is this idea that they've set up that Michael's pure evil, doesn't really have any kind of human connection or love for anything, and that he would immediately feel a connection with this guy. Did you guys have a hard time with that?
I don't think so. I think
Why do you think it happens? Does Michael see something of himself in this kid? Like he sees, like, you've got the potential, kid.
Well,
I do think that there's that. Sorry, Justin, I didn't mean to interrupt, but there is. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between what Michael Myers is in Halloween Kills and what he is in this movie.
I kind of agree and disagree at the same time.
Yeah, but I do think he sees either like the potential or like I'm glad that we didn't get like Michael Myers' backstory. But was it is it similar to this kid's? And we can. That's one of the things we can kind of.
We
debate.
know Michael couldn't have an experience like this kid because we saw his origin essentially in the first minutes of the original Halloween. He was just a little kid that killed his sister.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So he didn't get traumatized. He didn't grow up traumatized. So their origins are completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's an observer, Michael Myers, right?
He is.
Like we see him stand and watch, and I don't
never say a word. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't assume that he's been completely oblivious to the happenings and ongoings of Haddonfield in the 4 years that have passed.
Maybe he just wants to turn the town evil.
And, I guess my assumption was that he recognized this kid because this is probably, other than Laurie Strode and maybe Allison, the most famous person in town, or himself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in theory, there's nothing to stop him from taking off his mask and walking around. Not that many people know what he looks like.
Yeah,
sure.
And he's pretty good at sneaking.
He could just be another bum.
Yeah. He's pretty good at sneaking around and not being seen, too.
Yeah, and if he walks around, it would stand as a reason they might just think he's another homeless guy.
Yeah, and I think he might know who this kid is, and he might know what happened. Then that people think he's a psychopath.
He's like, hey, you killed that little kid. Respect.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. So that was the work that I did during that, because I had the same question. And I was like, interesting that he didn't kill him. Why?
Well, yeah. And also, I think what's really cool about this movie is it portrays something I never thought I'd see. And it's this idea at the very beginning of the movie, they comment on basically what my biggest problem with Halloween Kills was that Michael got shot in the head. His fingers were cut off. He got stabbed. He got beat.
Yeah.
Like,
he was superhuman.
The man is either supernatural or completely incapable of feeling pain and bleeding out to death.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie sort of addresses that. And at the beginning of the movie, they talk about how Michael can't be human because of all that stuff that happened to him. But the first time we really see him, when Corey meets Michael Myers in this movie, Michael Myers is old.
Sure.
It seems like time has caught up with him and he is not what he used to be. He's missing fingers. He's slow. He's not as strong as he used to be.
Sure, if he's recovered from all those injuries from Halloween Kills, in a sewer.
It stands to reason he went and crawled into the sewer, and for 4 years, he has been licking his wounds.
Yeah.
And I kind of appreciate that. It makes me feel like the end of Halloween Kills is a little less stupid.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because like it portrays Michael as an aging man. He didn't in Halloween Kills. He felt like the freaking devil, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I didn't like about it. What?
And in the first, Halloween 2018, the first of these.
Yeah, but in that one, they still didn't cross as many lines as they crossed in Kills to make him seem like a supernatural being, I don't think. They kept it somewhat reasonable to where it's like, okay, he's just an escaped crazy guy with that super crazy guy strength that they have,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this movie kind of settles him back down to that. Like, yeah, what we saw in Halloween Kills was insane, but also the town thinks that as well. That's part of what makes him so scary and so villainous to these people, is that there's no reason he should be alive right now. And as we see in this movie, he kind of barely is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Corey's able to push him down and take his mask. And so I like the idea that Michael is just an old man in this movie. And I think that's what really I keep coming back to in my brain, Chris, is like, yeah, you have your little motorcycle scenes. but what I'm getting is like, oh, Michael is a man after all. And this movie's not afraid to show that. And they're actually showing a little bit of Michael's point of view on this in a way that the other movies seemed less concerned with, without ruining the mystery and the allure around him,
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Moving on, I guess maybe a natural moving on point, if we're done with that, is talking about Corey's transition to evil, wanting to kill people.
Well, it seems like it happened when he looked into Michael's eyes.
Yeah.
Well, he walks out and he kills that bum.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. And they make it, as soon as they make eye contact, it's like either Michael looking into his soul or him looking into Michael's eyes and then everything bubbling to the surface. But they actually show you clips of everything that's going through his brain as has happened to him.
Yeah.
Then he runs out, kills the homeless guy, and then it seems like the switch is flipped, right?
Yeah.
And he's certainly more confident, like as like a person. He's like,
right. And they have often credited Michael Myers in the first Halloween and then in David Gordon Green's saga as the Shape.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm taking from this is that the Shape can exist in many forms, and so far it has just existed in Michael Myers. But the Shape can come forward, whether through some kind of means, and it's almost like an enlightenment.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, that's
what is she?
The last lines of her book or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That she's writing.
Yeah.
What was the
what
last
are
line?
they exactly? I can't remember.
Evil doesn't go away; it just changes. Something
changes
like
Changes shape.
Yeah.
Changes shape. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly an intentional thing. I saw it as, the Shape, Michael looking into his eyes, and I think that's how I made the connection that he knows what this kid has been through. Because otherwise we're talking about like psychic abilities and the ability to read minds by touching someone's throat.
Or looking into their eyes.
Or looking into their eyes, But, the eyes are the window to the soul, they say. So who knows?
Indeed.
But anyways, and hence him letting him go. And I think my question is it the letting go and Corey thinking like, I've been held by pure evil, this guy who's killed everybody, why did he let me go? Like, do you think it's Corey questioning himself? Like, did he let me go because I'm the same as him and he recognized that? And maybe I am, because he's been living with 4 years of people in the town being freaked out by him or hating him or thinking he's a psychopath. And, as much as I dislike the scene, there's the scene with the kid's dad at the pool table when they're talking to him. And he says, is he a psychopath, or did this town turn him into a psychopath?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess like in a non-supernatural explanation is that the town's pressure on him, coupled with like suddenly being let go by a notorious like serial killer, is like the thing that snapped him. But briefly, I thought they were going for like a kind of a possession angle.
Yeah, I wasn't sure for a minute. Well, I think you have something there. I think it's this idea that coming face to face with the Shape, if the Shape in Michael Myers didn't exist in this town, if he had just stayed in jail and hadn't broken out 40 years later and gone on like a killing spree where he killed God knows how many people. So, like, would the town have treated him this way? Would the accident have even happened? So, in a sense, Michael's legacy has created this person's current position in life, right? Like,
sure.
Without Michael Myers' legacy, his life would be completely different. So I think it's the idea of coming face to face with this thing that has scarred the town so badly it ruined his life by an extension, and having that thing look into his eyes and then let him go and then forge some sort of weird relationship. I think maybe that's it, right? Maybe like to him, the Shape is his creator in a sense. Like, well, he created this, like it's because of him I'm living this life, and now he sees me and views me as some sort of peer. I don't know.
Everyone thinks I'm him anyways.
Yeah, and then he's looking at me and apparently thinks something similar, so.
Yeah. And a lot of that came out in that question, like maybe one of the lines of dialogue that like made me think the most, when Corey asks Allison, he's, did you get away or did he let you go? He asks her at one point, and I thought that was really interesting.
He's kind of trying to figure out why he survived and compare it to why Allison survived. And Allison survived because her mother sacrificed herself. And he survived because, all the reasons we just said.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this. I think that there is a reading of this film that could be I don't like this reading of the film, but I wonder what you guys think about it. About like a mass shooter. Like Corey is a stand-in for, like a kid shooting up a school. How do you guys feel about that?
I'd like to hear more, I guess, details on what
it's
that
about the
means.
So Corey, is essentially this bad thing happens and he's ostracized by the town, and the town,
he's isolated. He's a loser.
Yeah, he doesn't let him back in, and then he starts murdering people.
Okay, so he's like the kid in school that everyone picks on.
And then calls him
like a school shooter. Like, oh, you're a school shooter.
It's almost like he could have been a mass shooter had he not met Michael and decided that
stabbing people,
being slasher is the way to go instead.
Yeah. He is.
Maybe.
He is essentially.
His arc is that of like an incel mass shooter type.
This is Elephant.
Sure.
Yeah. But I don't know. I kind of don't want that real life to be on top of this movie. I think I like it less if they're talking about school shootings. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't think they're talking specifically about school shootings, but I think they are talking about this idea that your environment can turn you into an isolated person who will lash out.
Sure.
I don't think it's a one-for-one on school shooters, but I think the movie is certainly saying that if society ostracizes you and isolates you, that's never a good thing. And it's certainly, you're not going to develop in a healthy way.
Yeah, but one step further, society is reacting to its environment as well. Like they're ostracizing him because of Michael Myers.
Yeah, every single bad event that's happened in that town in the 4 years, they blamed on Michael Myers. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think it's just like the environment shapes everything, right? And if you have this environment, this sort of like legacy of like, not only is it going to affect you in the sense of like, maybe being scared of what's around the corner or the noise outside or something like that, but also you're going to mess with other people too.
Which I actually think kind of goes to the Jamie Lee Curtis plot. And we haven't really talked a lot about her, but she's trying to, at the very end, she says, lists all the different things that she's felt about Michael Myers. And one of them is like, I tried to forgive you. She's tried to move on past this. And that's a thing that the town couldn't do. So maybe that's kind of how that fits in. I don't know. I feel like this movie is a lot of interesting things that don't necessarily fit in all together very well.
You know what? This movie, what I thought of about 3/4 into this movie, I thought this feels like a movie that the studio had no confidence in whatsoever. And so the marching orders for David Gordon Green were, get this thing as short as possible.
It does feel that way.
Because they had the review embargo that didn't lift until like 2 hours before the movie premiered, which is never a good sign.
Sure.
So I think they were aware that this would be
controversial.
Controversial, yes. I think that they were like, look, we got to make some money on opening weekend to justify this whole venture. Get this thing under 2 hours. Get this thing as close to an hour and a half as you can. And then we'll just let opening weekend carry us through this thing. And that's what it feels like to me. It feels like there's probably a better version of this movie that is 2 hours and 15 minutes. But the problem is that too long for a Halloween movie to do? I don't know. Traditionally, these things are pretty short.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, we haven't even touched on the thing that I felt was breezed over the hardest. And that was the parade of destroying Michael's body.
That was cool. That was so cool.
I think it was
and
cool.
I wanted more of it.
Yeah, exactly. It was cool. Like conceptually, I love it. But
I want a
jumped
scene where she's like driving through all the streets, honking her horn, waking everyone up. And so that you could see like a scene of everyone being like, "Oh my God, is that him? Is that the boogeyman or whatever?"
Yeah. Like I wanted more of that. Exactly what you're saying is like people realizing what's
like
happening and figuring it out and deciding to join in and getting more emotion of the town involved rather than just like
especially after
subsequent shots where there's suddenly more and more cars and more, nameless, faceless people.
I was so
especially
nervous.
after Halloween Kills.
Like, I was
when the
so
town
nervous
is
that
so much of the focus.
Right. But I thought at any moment, and I was hoping that they wouldn't do this, but like that Michael Myers would like wake up and start killing people again. Mm-hmm. I was just like, just kill him, just chop his head off and get it over with. Let's not draw this out any longer.
Well, let's talk about the final scene real quick. Let's the final showdown with Jamie Lee Curtis, where Corey comes in with the Michael Myers mask after he beats up, or doesn't even beat up Michael Myers. I think Michael Myers kind of lets him go, but anyway, he shows up to Jamie Lee Curtis's house, to Laurie's house, and he's all dressed like Michael Myers, and then Laurie Strode fakes her suicide, which was fun. Yeah. Like when he opens the door and she's like, "Did you really think I'd kill myself?" And then immediately gets the upper hand. That was cool. I liked that. And then, the dude stabs himself. The daughter runs away. Okay, so then enter the real Michael Myers now. He comes in, he picks up his mask, and he's like, "Oh, hey, since I'm here, let's attack Laurie Strode again." Again, not seemingly particularly invested in going after her specifically, which has been an ongoing... Yeah, she's just there. And
it seemed like she locked the door. She's like, "This is the final showdown. Like, I'm locked in here. You're locked in here. Let's do this."
Yeah, it's like the end of part one, the 2018 one, but like more up close and personal. Instead of making a mouse trap in the basement, she's like, "Let's just fight to the death."
Yeah,
and because he's so old now and seemingly probably has a lot of damage and nerve damage from previously, she's able to like win with the help of her daughter, who has a change of heart very quickly. And from this point on, like once Michael's like captured, the movie I think is like, it's a great ending to Halloween. Like she slits his throat, she stabs his arteries, she cuts his wrists, all of that stuff. And then she's like, "No, he's not dead enough." And then the parade starts, and like all of that I think is great. But man, I just wish there was a stronger build up to that point, because like I was unable to enjoy it the way I wanted to, because it's just breezing through all of this stuff so quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also feel conflicted, because they're carrying a body through town, and it's kind of sick and gross. But at the same time, you're like, yes,
it's healing for them, though.
Yeah.
I didn't feel conflicted at all. It's Michael Myers, buddy.
I was conflicted because he was going to wake up at any moment.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I wasn't conflicted there. I think my big complaint is the same as Justin's, which is like have more fanfare and character work for the town around that. That's a big cathartic moment for them, and I feel like we don't get to focus on it enough.
Yeah,
sure. Especially that we spent so much time in Halloween Kills with the town, and in this movie too. I do really I think one of my complaints was about the first Halloween 2018 was that he got away, which we knew he was going to do, but you're just like, I'm glad that I got this ending, and you never get this in slasher films, but you see his body, go through the crusher, I would like more trilogies like this, especially with horror movies. Give me that catharsis of seeing the villain die like that. Which I guess you guys actually wanted more of, with the whole end of the town, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it.
Yeah.
What a weird movie, guys.
It is such a weird movie.
Yeah.
So weird, but I mean, everything we've said for the most part, obviously we've had complaints, but like this is all the stuff that was making me enjoy it and making me entertained,
well, and that's
making
that's
me
the
want
stuff.
more.
Yeah, that's the stuff where like, okay, so I watched this Thursday night, like I've said twice now. Our friend John, Justin, our friend, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
He texted me after it was over because he's a big slasher film fan, and he was like, "That was weird and kind of bad." And I was like, I mean, yes and no, and as each day has gone on, like I said, I think about it frequently. Like I think about this weird egg of a movie that's just like tough to crack,
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much there to like, and so much that's thought out and smart. And I hope that there is like, you know how like whenever Halloween Kills came out, there was an extended version?
Was there?
Yeah, there's an extended version that exists of Halloween Kills. I haven't watched it.
Oh.
I didn't know that, but that's cool.
But I'm hoping this movie has the same thing.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing an extended version. More motorcycle riding. Hopefully it's like 15 minutes more motorcycle riding.
Who rides the motorcycle better, Michael Myers or Allison on Corey's back?
Allison on Corey's back just yelling and being mad about the world. That's what I liked.
Does Michael Myers ride the motorcycle? Am I forgetting this?
Yeah,
I feel like he's on the back of the motorcycle at one point when they go on their killing spree. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think well, I saw like people talking about this and the way that it's edited after they kill Allison's boss and coworker at the house and they kind of tag team Michael Myers and Corey.
That was fun, by the way.
They tag team kill them.
Yeah.
Then the next shot is a wide shot of them of two people riding the motorcycle. And the way it's edited, briefly, you're like, oh, is that him and Michael just like riding back on this killing spree? But it's Corey and Allison. We've
okay, so they just walk silently to houses together to kill, I guess.
I guess. I don't know.
I thought it was implied that Michael was on the back of the motorcycle with him.
That'd be crazy.
I mean, that would be a funny shot.
That'd be something, yeah.
I mean, I've seen like Photoshop mock-ups of it.
Yeah, I have too.
I liked the kill at the radio station quite a bit.
With the tongue?
Yeah. And him cutting the tongue out and it being on the record and like making it skip. It was just absolutely grotesque and brutal. And
the blowtorch scene, I think, was the most brutal kill for me.
Oh yeah, that's pretty brutal. It kind of happened in the foreground and out of focus, though.
Yeah, the girl that like had been defending him the whole time, getting run over, I think was because like there's a second like her like head explodes, like he runs over her head. That was the more grotesque one.
He steps on her head.
Does he step on her head?
Something happens. She's just trapped him to the fence, like under the car.
Oh, okay.
For a while, for everyone getting killed, everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think once this movie basically starts becoming a Halloween movie, about 45 minutes into it, an hour into it, it's a stronger movie. And I think it's the first half, the first 2/3 or whatever, that needs a little bit more fleshing out, in my opinion, with the exception of the town parade at the end.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
I'm excited to see the Exorcism trilogy. You know, I think...
Is it going to be a trilogy?
I think so. I think that's the idea.
How ambitious.
Yeah, make one good movie first and then decide to do two more, much like they did for Halloween.
Well, I mean, sure. I see your point on that, but like also if you're going to make a trilogy, is it better to go ahead and plan out all three? Or, I don't know.
Right,
I don't know which one's better, to be honest, but
I don't know. I mean, and I think you could write it still the way that you want, because I mean, isn't the thing for trilogies is like it's tough to find trilogies with sequels that are better than the original. So just like the original is usually the best. So I don't know why you couldn't write it whatever way you want it to go eventually.
Sure. I do think it's going to be the exact same as this, where they pick up after Exorcism 1.
He seems to really like that.
Yeah. The Lego sequels. It'll be interesting. I like the ideas that are in this. I don't always like the execution, but he's this like independent movie director that did like George Washington and All the Right Girls, and he has these ideas and things in there. I think that if the studio gets out of his way, maybe that's part of it, but I don't know. I think he could really put out something pretty great.
Yeah. David Gordon Green's a very hard to peg filmmaker, like hard to peg down. Like this idea that he can do something like Your Highness, which is unanimously hated, or George Washington, or Pineapple Express, which is a perfect example of that like Judd Apatow genre action comedy from that era,
Sure.
And then he can do something like Halloween 2018, and then he can do something like Halloween Kills. And
did I ever tell you I met David Gordon Green like
I think
10,
you did
15
once.
years ago? Yeah. I told him you should do Halloween.
So this is all your fault.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Or, yeah.
For better or worse.
Anyways.
So anyways, yeah, I mean, I'm down to see what he does with The Exorcist, but yeah, make one good movie first. Let's do that.
Sure. Agreed.
Well, I think if I were to say I was down for it, I would be contradicting myself earlier, saying that I wished exorcism and possession movies would end, at least for a while.
Can't do that now, buddy.
So I quite literally cannot say that I'm looking forward to it. But between us,
Fair enough.
I'm intrigued.
Good. Do we have anything else we want to talk about today?
No, I don't think
so.
I'm good.
I think that's it for this episode.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so thank you, listener, for listening if you made it to this point. It's a long one. Longer than I thought our discussion about this movie would be.
I had a feeling the discussion for this movie might get out of hand.
Yeah.
And it did.
Boy, did it. And then, of course, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bobscotch.
All right, stay tuned to this feed. Our next Casually Criterion episode will be over high and low.
Hopefully. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Your ears mean the world to us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Boy.